Hello, hello. All right, hi everybody. We are here for part 2 of defining the move-in process. And as we talked about in our last time, we're going to we'll do a good review of all of that. So I'm gonna wait about 5 minutes tops to let everyone get on that's registered. We already got people coming in. If you want to just say hi, let us know where you're coming from. I know a lot of you, actually looking at those that are on here. It's great to have you all. And again, brief overview of what we're going to be doing today to make sure you're on the right webinar and that you want to stick to watch the rest of it. We'll be, this is starting with processes from scratch, part 2. We have part 1, which was included in the follow-up email and the invite you got for this webinar. We'll include it again in the follow-up email from this call. The recording for this webinar will be accessible at the exact same URL. So if you want to share it with your team or anyone else, it will be accessible here as well as on our blog by the end of today. And then also the slide deck that we're looking at that you can currently see that I'm sharing, as well as the process worksheet that we're going to be going off of, will also be available in the follow-up email for all of you. So again, we're just going to wait a little bit to have everyone jump on. And yeah, feel free if you want to pipe up in the chat to let me know where you're coming from. Also, if you want to ask a question along the way, today is going to be really hands-on. We're really going to be basically taking the process that we worked on last time in the part 1 of this webinar, where we defined it in our process worksheet, and we have a blank template that we will be able to give to you just like we did in the last webinar. So we went through all of it and defined our process. Now we're going to be taking it and putting it into LeadSimple. So the second stage of defining your process is actually getting to the point where you move it into LeadSimple. So a lot of you have asked about, can we just get a starting from scratch, all the basic steps of taking your process and then moving it into LeadSimple. So again, we will do an overview. I'm going to be running through that slide deck really quick to talk about our framework and how we think about processes and how you should as you're going to be defining them. And then we'll look at the worksheet again briefly, and then we'll take the worksheet and shift it into LeadSimple from the very scratch. So we have no move-in process in our LeadSimple account, and we'll be starting from scratch. All right, we're going to wait just a little longer for a few more people to jump on, and then we will get rolling. I hope everyone is staying safe and well. It's been nice to have the sun start coming out again. Really enjoyed that. I don't know for all of you, that probably isn't happening for everyone yet, but summer is on the horizon, and looking forward to having that good weather, and it actually helps you stay well better too. All right, got a few more people coming on. We'll wait here just a second. I guess everyone wants to be quiet, so no one wants to say hi to me in the chat, so I'm just lonely. That's okay. I know you guys are listening, so one more minute and we'll get rolling. Again, for those that have jumped on, this is part 2 of a 2-part webinar series called Starting with Processes from Scratch. And we've taken the move-in process from scratch. We've defined using our process framework, which I'm going to go over again in the slides. I'm going to do a quick review. And then we've moved it into our worksheet, which basically takes that framework of thinking about processes, puts it on paper. Many of you already have this in your business. Some of you need a really good place to start. There's stages and steps to this. And today we will be able to actually plug it into LeadSimple. So if you try to just jump into LeadSimple right away, you'll likely be frustrated unless you have a pretty well-defined process. So that's why we're starting way back at the beginning and giving you a framework for how you think about processes before you try to get into the nitty-gritty of how to build it out in LeadSimple. All right. Okay, Aaron, Danielle, great to see you guys. And yes, the first part of the webinar has been recorded. It will be included again in your follow-up email that you receive, and it's already on the blog if you want to check that out. Matthew can link to that too. Okay, so it's 11:05. We're going to get going. Don't want to wait any longer. I'm sure people will jump on as well. Yeah, there's the link from Matt. Okay, so first off, we want to go over a quick overview of what we went over in part 1. So this is going to be fast, but I wanted to do it quickly before give a reminder to everybody. So first off, before you start, when you're coming up with what process to work on, first of all, you need to focus. So you need to choose a process and then work on one process at a time as you start systematizing your business. A lot of people take a scatter shotgun type approach and try to do everything at once. It really results in a lot more confusion than work that actually gets done. So focus on one process at a time and not making it perfect the first time through. You can always perfect and improve over time. Next, we start with the goal. So what is the main purpose and desired outcome of this process? If any of you have read the book by Simon Sinek, Start With Why, that's basically the point here. So we're starting with why is this process important? What's the purpose behind it and what's the goal? So you define that. Next, we define the process triggers. What are all of the events that can trigger this process? For Movein, that is generally a signed lease. Okay, and it could be different based on your business, but generally it's a signed lease. Then we define the process outcomes. And again, all of this is that worksheet that we're going to look at in a second that we worked on last time, that walks you through every one of these steps. But this is the framework and how you think about it. So define the process outcomes. What are all the possible outcomes of this process? So when you think about the outcomes, okay, for a move-in, well, it's pretty simple. The tenant moved in or the tenant canceled the move-in. And there could be maybe a variety of small reasons why the owner or the tenant canceled, and you would make note of that depending. And we'll talk about that once we get to the worksheet. So you define the process outcomes. How does this process end? And then to document any child processes. Okay. So as you're thinking about processes and linking them together, a move-in will likely include a move-in inspection. It might also include a work order to clean the property or a cleaning process, depending on how you want to set it up. So when you're thinking about processes, child processes are reusable processes that could be used in other processes. So a make ready is going to be used in multiple processes. So it should be its own process. If you aren't going to reuse the steps of a process in other areas, then it shouldn't be its own individual process. But if you are, then, and make ready is a great example of one that you'd want to be separate and use in multiple places. All right, define the staff roles. Okay, so what staff roles are involved in this process? A lot of times you guys might be departmental, you might be more portfolio. Staff roles is basically understanding who is involved in this process and not just the people, but what is their role. And that will really help when it comes down to assignment of the individual tasks. So you think about that. 6, define the customer roles. What customers are involved in this process? Okay, so when you think about that, basically for a move-in, who are you going to be communicating with during this process? And it will be owners and tenants the vast majority of the time. On work orders, you're going to have vendors involved. So define everyone that you communicate with, and that will really help you because LeadSimple has first-class support for segmenting communication to those different customer roles. Choose a deadline. Okay, so this is important too. How long does the process actually take? So when you're choosing a deadline, don't frustrate your team by choosing something that's ridiculous. Pick something that's realistic. Okay, that's really and what is currently happening, and then focus on improving on that over time if you're not happy with it. Next, we need to document some variability. So what are factors that cause this process to vary and change? And this will tie in to maybe conditional logic once we eventually get to LeadSimple and do that. So does the process change based on the property location or the utilities or different things like that? And that will help you define the entire scope of the process and not just the happy path or the golden path. Next, we need to choose our stages. So as you're thinking about processes, you can actually break them down into major milestones. Okay, so what are the major milestones in your process? And those stages help you keep track of where processes are at, not just a progress bar in terms of we're 75% complete. No, it's better to know, hey, we're in the property prep stage, or yeah, lots of different examples on how you could set that up. But basically, you're picking the major milestones of the process and writing those down before you get to the actual individual steps. Step 10 is actually defining the individual steps that are underneath each stage of a process, okay? So it's only at the end that you get to the actual steps after you've walked through all of these, this entire framework of thinking about a process, and it'll make it a lot simpler as you are documenting and systematizing your business. All right, I know a lot of other people have hopped on, so I just want to say, again, this is part 2. If you guys have any questions along the way, you can ask them in the Ask a Question bar at the bottom of the webinar. And yeah, we're basically just doing a quick overview of part 1. Then we'll be jumping into actually plugging in the move-in process from this worksheet that we defined last time into LeadSimple. So this is the move-in process worksheet. We have a blank template we'll provide to you guys again after the webinar is over. So don't worry about writing this down, or we'll give it to you and you'll have this blank template. So first off, we name our process. Again, we set the goal, finish final prep to get the property ready for rent for the tenant, collect all necessary documents, set up the necessary accounts, hand off keys, and move the tenant in. Okay, so we try to make it as concise as we can, and that's kind of the vision statement for this process and the goal. Triggers, signed lease, or it could also get triggered by the lease renewal process, depending. If the tenant decides to move out, then we may trigger that. This one is less likely to depend on how you have it set up in your business. Then we define our outcomes: tenant moved in, tenant canceled, child processes is inspection and work orders in this case. So we're going to have a move-in inspection, which is reusable. And in this case, I've actually decided to just define a reusable inspection process, and we'll look at that later. Staff roles, we have the leasing agent, which is usually, let's say, Rebecca on the team, or maintenance coordinator is usually Angela. And then we have our contact roles. So we usually are just communicating with tenants and owners. So those are the 2 contact roles. And once we get into LeadSimple, that will make a lot of sense of why we define those. As far as deadlines, what is the move-in date? So setting the lease based on a prior tenant move out, cleaning, and inspection. And then our KPIs, which are key performance indicators, is we're going to be tracking time to complete. And you might have other ones that you want to track along the way as well. And then we make notes, what software is involved. So we're obviously your PM software, Appfolio Property Manager, or Rent Manager, Propertyware, Buildium, and then property listing software, however you list your properties, and then email CRM, which in this case, LeadSimple. So now that we've got the worksheet and we actually have all of these steps here defined and the stages, I want to jump into LeadSimple and show you how to take this process and everything we've worked on into LeadSimple from scratch. Okay, so I'm actually going to move this over so I can look at it while I work with you guys in LeadSimple. All right, so this is LeadSimple account, and again, we don't have this process at all. So under processes, we can actually add a process down here at the bottom. You can see we have a lot of different processes in this particular account, but I don't have move-ins yet. So I'm going to click add a process. Takes me to the library. And the reason why it takes me to the library is because you can choose to create a new custom process, which is what we're going to do today, or you can actually work with one of our template processes. So if you wanted to work with a template, if I wanted to use the move-in process here that we already have defined, I'm not going to do that today because I want to start literally from scratch. But if I did, then you can click in, and then you would click copy into my account. So if I did that, then you would click use this workflow, okay? And then create a new process type and do it that way. I'm going to start custom from from the beginning here. So we're actually just going to create without any stages. It's going to be completely empty to show you all the steps of how to create this move-in process in LeadSimple. So move-ins, each individual one is going to be called a move-in. The reason why we have a singular name is because when we automatically name your processes, it would say move-in for 123 test property. So we use the property address in the name of every process automatically. So I hit save and boom, it's actually in our account now. We have move-ins and it brings me to the team right away. I'm actually going to jump back to general though, because that is where we are going to set up our contact roles and our assignee roles. Now you might be wondering, okay, what's a contact role? What's an assignee role? It's just complicated. Basically, it's what we already worked through in the worksheet though. So I have the worksheet open on the side here. I guess I could, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have it in both here so I can still show you guys, but I can look at it too. So we defined our staff roles. Those are like your people that are involved in the process. And then we have contact roles, okay? And those are who external to the company are we going to be communicating with. So in LeadSimple, we have first-class support for that. So I'm going to add a contact role for owners and one for tenants. And then I'm actually going to map it to our owner pipeline and to our tenant pipeline. Now, the reason why I do this is if you have property management sync set up, you will have data from your property management software, and mapping the contact role to a pipeline actually allows us to pull in the current owners and the current tenants automatically when you're creating processes. That will make some sense after I get a little bit further, and you can learn more here. So it's a link to read more about contact roles and how exactly that works. But basically, pipelines set up relationships between properties and contacts, and your owner pipeline is the relationship of owners. Obviously can have multiple properties. And so when we add a property to a process, we can actually grab the current owners based on the data from your Appfolio Propertyware PM software account. So that's really important and really cool. So we'll look at that. Next, we need to define our assignee roles. So assignee roles are basically if you want to have tasks assigned to a role, and this role can have multiple users or one user in it, but it could be a different user based on the process. It'll make sense a little bit after we move on, but we already defined earlier that we have a leasing agent and we also have a maintenance coordinator, and these are shorthand for them. Since it's just nicer to have that shorter hand. Maintenance coordinator is a really long word. So I'm going to add both of those in here. So these are the team member roles that are involved, and then people can be put into each of these roles, and that'll make sense as we keep going. So now that we've defined that, that's all there really is in general. Team, this is really important. So everyone that you want to have access to this process needs to be on the team of that process. If they don't need to see it in their sidebar, then just remove them from the team. Everyone can also have granular permissions, which I'll show you in just a second. And if you haven't invited a user yet, you can actually invite them from this view too. So I can click invite new user here and send them an email with an invitation to add their user account. So that's the team. If I jump into Jordan, then I'll show you that the process he has process permissions here, and they're really granular for every single process. So you have move-ins, and then he has access to everything. Obviously, he's Jordan, CEO, so he gets access to everything. But yeah, really granular permissions here, and it's good to take note of that, and you can set them up on a per user basis. Then we get to stages and workflows. Now, this is the meat of your process. This is basically your process template that will get reused over and over and over, and you can update it and improve on it over time. We have 4 categories of stages. And in the worksheet, we define stages, which we didn't look at right earlier, but we did in the previous webinar. The first one we have is collecting information. Then we have all its tasks underneath it. And then we have prepare property and handoff, all of its tasks. And then we have tenant moved in. Now in LeadSimple, as you've completed this worksheet and you're ready to put it in, then we have 4 categories of stages. Backlog stages, these are really only used in processes that need on-hold stages. In this case, we don't really need an on-hold stage. Once a move-in started, it's going to be either completed or it's going to be canceled. So we have active stages, completed, and canceled stages. So our first active stage, as we've defined it in our worksheet, is collecting information. So I'm going to add that. And then the second one is prepare property and handoff. And then our completed stage is tenant moved in. And then canceled stage, I'm just going to call it canceled because I think there's not a lot more to say than that. But you can have multiple canceled stages, which can be different reasons, and they can have steps underneath them as well. We'll get to that in a bit. So now that we've got our stages, now we're going to go through each one and add in the steps and templates and everything. So again, this webinar is really focused, and we're going to get into the nitty-gritty to show you guys how to actually set this up. So again, from our worksheet, we have all of our tasks here. Okay, so the first task is we need to actually add. Let me expand this window a little bit. All right, so first one is a to-do, and it is do we have a copy of the signed lease? All right, next one, do we have a copy of the driver's license? Copy of tenant credit report. So the reason why I'm adding these as separate tasks, and this is something we defined in the previous webinar, is I want them all to be checked off by the user that is assigned to this process, and it will be tracked in the activity feed for this process. Now I'm going to add my first email step. So after they've checked all of these off, I'm going to not make these stop tasks. Again, stop tasks means the subsequent steps will not be scheduled until that task is completed. In this case, I want to schedule almost all these steps at once and not wait for them to be completed before they're scheduled. So I'm going to make them not stop tasks, but I also want them to be required. So I'm going to set them to be required or sticky so that if the user changes the stage, then they won't disappear. All right, so we have copy of signed lease. Again, you can see that we've defined all of this here. And then we have our modifiers. So you see how we have them up here, and that's included in your worksheet. So I'm just calling all of these required, but not any of them are stop tasks. And then it also tells me who it should be assigned to. All right, so now that we have all of those things, we're ready to collect the security deposit and or first months from tenant. And now again, this might not be exactly how you would have your process set up, but I want to show you at least a solid example of all of the features and how you could set it up if this was exactly what you'd want to do. I've seen it a lot of different ways. A lot of times you are getting the security deposit at this point. Other times you've done it before now. Now I'm actually creating a template though, and templates are awesome in LeadSimple because they allow you to reuse a bunch of text. So security deposit / first month's rent. And then I'm going to use merge tags to actually pull data from the process. So I'm going to say hi, click down here on merge tags. This is super important if you haven't seen it or you aren't familiar with that. Merge tags allow you to pull data from the process. You can see all these options here, and we'll get into more of them. But some of the most important is, you know how we define tenants and owners as the contact roles? Now we can actually grab the tenant's first name. And here's a trick too. We can actually .all.first name, and it will print out all of their names, comma separated with an and if there's 3 of them. So it would, once we look at this, it will say hi, Bob and Susan. If there were 3 tenants. So that all trick is pretty cool, and I'd recommend you guys use that. So I'm just going to add that. And again, remember that your email signature will always be appended to the end of the emails that you send. So you don't need to add any signature related stuff to your templates. Now that I save that template, I'm gonna click on it. Now we're using it here, sending to the tenants contact role, not all, because this is focused on tenants. And then I'm gonna make it required, not make it a stop task, and then we'll move on. All right, so remove, next one, just simple task to remove the property from listing sites. And then I could add some detailed instructions here. I could also embed a video or screenshots if I wanted to do that as well. And don't make that a stop. Okay, I'm gonna just pound this out here. So create tenant record in PM software, update the property in PM software, depending on which one you use, obviously, and then the instructions, you can have detailed instructions on all of these tasks or not, depending on what you actually want to do. And then we want to actually trigger a process, at this point, a work order process. And this is for cleaning the property. So I'm actually going to click work orders here. And now once I get to this point in the process, it will tell me to trigger the work order. And so that's pretty cool. And I can trigger that process and it'll be tracked. So I'll give an example of that as well. So that's really the end of our first stage. And I'm going to go back and starting the work order process at this point is actually going to be assigned to the maintenance coordinator. So I'm going to do that. And I can use that assignee role here. And whichever user is under that assignee role will now be assigned this task. And that'll make a little bit more sense in a bit. In this case, we actually didn't have any conditional logic because this was basically going to be pretty straightforward. Not a lot of reason to have conditional logic, but to cover that, we do have conditional logic based on all of these fields and any other custom fields you add to these different entities, processes, property, and unit, so that you can basically make steps conditional based on that. So I could say, hey, if this property has an HOA and it's set to yes, then do this, otherwise not. I'm not going to add that because we don't need it. There wasn't a need for conditionality. And so after the work order process is done, then we're automatically move to prepare property and handoff, which is our next stage. Okay. So again, this is stuff that we define in the worksheet. So we finished that first stage and now we're on prepare property and handoff. So make the final preparations on the property and hand over the keys. Okay. So the first task is actually a stop task. So is cleaning work order complete? Check in sidebar. So since we triggered that process triggered the work order from this process, we'll be able to see it in the sidebar because everything is linked together. That'll make sense once I actually do a manual process here and show you guys how that works. So we're like, hey, is it complete? And if it's not complete, then we don't continue to move. The next thing we need to do is schedule the move-in inspection. Okay, so I'm not going to make that a stop task. And then I'm actually going to add a trigger to trigger the move-in inspection. Now, these things are actually still all assigned to the maintenance coordinator since he is or she is involved at this point of the process. So after those things, so those will all be assigned to whoever is under that role. And so we'll schedule the move-in inspection, start the move-in inspection, and then if the move-in inspection is complete, then you'll also be able to see that in sidebar. That'll make sense in a sec after I show you guys that. So is it complete? So that's a stop task 2. And then schedule the move-in date. All right, so this is actually gonna be the first custom field we're gonna add. So schedule the move-in date, and I'm gonna say, edit the move-in date in the sidebar if not set. All right, so we don't have that custom field yet, so I'm gonna show you guys how to do that really quick. So I'm gonna go to custom fields, and we have custom fields that can go on leads, contacts, properties, units, processes. It can be a little bit overwhelming first. In this case, when you're thinking about where to add a custom field, think about it in terms of basically, is this a custom field that I would want on future processes? If that's the case, it's likely a property related field. So HOA, obviously, whether or not that's yes or no, is a property related field. So you can see here, former rent, property related field, utilities region is a property related field. For this process though, move-in date is not. It's really just for the move-in process. So it should be on the move-in process. So I'm going to call it move-in. And we're going to just put it on the move-in process, but you can put it on multiple now, which is cool. So you can have it on multiple different processes. And we'll make it a date time, save that, come back up to stages and workflows, and then go back into our stage, go into our instructions, and now we actually have access to that. So process.movein, and then default will be not set. I'll just make that bold. So that'll make sense here in a sec after we run a manual process through. I know I got to keep hammering this out because we're going to run out of time fast. Okay, email is the next step. So we're going to email, notify tenant of the move-in date, and create another template for this. Okay. And then, so we're basically just notifying the tenant that we moved in. And you can actually put emojis if you want to in the subject. They're supported by the vast majority of email clients. Then I'm going to say hi, tenant's first name, and then do all, just in case there's multiple, which is very common. So hi, tenants. We set your move-in date for, and then I can actually grab that from the process, and it will print it out and bold that so they see it. Sweet. Make sure that's just sending to tenants. And then, yeah. So schedule the move-in date. Then we send the notification. And then we confirm that we have everything from the tenant before giving the keys. We can have detailed instructions on that. Type. And then, so after we confirm that, then we actually will meet with the tenant at that time. So this is actually really cool because I can schedule this. So let's meet with the tenant on the move-in date to hand over all keys, garage door opens, blah, blah, blah. Now, I want to make sure that this is scheduled at the appropriate time. So I can actually schedule it relative to the due date or the move-in date that we define, that custom move-in date. So I'm going to say 0 minutes before custom move-in. I'm actually going to do 1 minute before, so it saves. Now, you'll see once we get to that point in the process, this will be scheduled appropriately. So if we've set the move-in date in the future, then it will remind me and the task will be due at that time in the future. And then I'm going to add a reminder to this particular task so I never forget a meeting to remind me 60 minutes beforehand so I can make sure to be there on time. Make these all required because that's the way I had it set up. That's really up to you guys on what you want to do there. And yeah, assign, this will actually be the leasing agent that will do this particular task. So they will get a reminder and you can have detailed instructions on that meeting as well if you want. So that's actually the end of that stage. So I'm going to actually set this up to automatically move to tenant moved in. Since it's good to connect all those if you want to do the automatic moving, it's nice. Okay, so then our last stage that we defined is tenant moved in. Okay, and so it's really pretty simple. We'll hit next, and for tenant move in, we notify the tenant that the tenant has moved in and pay the referral fee if applicable. So we're going to do that. We need to notify the owners that a tenant has moved in. So we're going to create another template. Tenant has moved into, this is another trick. You can actually use merge tags in the subject. All you have to do, if you don't know the format, is you can print them out and then copy paste them into the subject as well, and property street will always be set, so I don't need the default. And then I could say, hi, owner's first name, and then tenant just moved into property.street. Obviously, really up to you. I'm not defining these fully. Example. So now we notify the owner that the tenant's moved in, and then if the tenant was or the owner was referred, pay the referral fee. Okay, and you could have instructions on that. And that's obviously if you have a referral program and all of that, but it's pretty common that most people do. And I'm going to make both of those required as well. And the referral fee could be assigned to a particular person as well. If there's someone in the accounting department that should be doing that, yeah, we'll just say that Chris is assigned to that, and then notifying the owner will be the process, whoever's assigned to the process. Next, I want to define the canceled stage really quick, and it's pretty simple. This one is make a note of why this process was this move-in canceled. Can't type. And then also we need to cancel or return security deposit if necessary. Obviously, there could be different steps here. This is just pretty common from what I've seen. Okay, so now we're going to jump back out. We've defined all this. Now the next step is to actually run a test, okay? And there'll be lots of iterations of you doing this. So a lot of times what I do is I actually leave stages and workflows open and then duplicate the tab so that I can jump back and forth to my settings as well as look at the process. And I'm going to add a process from scratch. So this is going to show you why setting up those contact roles properly and having the data map, the pipeline or the contact role map to a pipeline is important. So Freeman Road, which is Alaska, so the North Pole, going to pull in the owners. So we have Samantha as an owner, Santa Claus and Jessica Claus are all owners. Tenants for this process, we don't have them added currently. This is what I wanted to do. So I picked a property that doesn't have any tenants added yet. Then we have our assignee roles, which is leasing agent and maintenance coordinator. So I'm going to assign Amy as the leasing agent and Matt as the maintenance coordinator. It automatically is assigning the overall process to me and automatically name the process properly. And you can see our move-in custom field down here, which we don't know yet. So I'm just going to trigger this, hit save. And now we have our tasks. So I'm just going to click down through this and you guys will see how this will work. So copy of signed lease, great. Tenant's driver's license, tenant credit report, copy of tenant's application. Oh, sweet. Okay, I want to send this to the tenant. Wait, okay, why can't I email? Well, you can't email because you haven't added any tenants yet. So I'm going to add James Bond as our tenant because that's pretty cool. And now we can email him. So we're going to email James Bond. You can see it's printing out his name, testing 1, 2, 3, which is a template I defined. So it's sweet that it automatically fills all this based off of our workflow step we defined. So I'm going to send that to him, automatically completed the task, shows it down here. And when you have that email for all time as well. Then we have removing the property from listing sites, detailed instructions, which you would be able to add here. And I would create the tenant in the PM software. That's great. Utilities accounts set up. Yep, we're done. Cool. Now we need to create work order process. And this is for the cleaning. So this is actually assigned to Matthew because he's the maintenance coordinator. If I say no one, then it defaults back to me. But basically, this is how assignee roles work. So you can have, I'm the process assignee. I'm like the process owner, but you can have different roles with different people in them. I'm just going to do this for Matt because he's lazy, as we all know, and trigger this process. So I've triggered the work order for cleaning. And I can jump back and I want to show you guys. Now that process is in the sidebar right here. So for all time, I can actually see that it's linked, and I can check on it. So now it's going to be like, hey, is the cleaning work order complete? Oh, nope, it's not. It's not in a completed stage. So I'm just going to skip ahead and say, yay, it's completed, and enjoy my confetti, and then jump back here so that I can say, yep, it's completed. Matt completed that. And then the next thing we need to do is schedule the move-in inspection. So that's up to Matt too, but I'm going to do it for him. So I'm going to trigger the move-in inspection, pulls in my owners, and then I'm also going to just complete it for him. So that would get scheduled, and that's a whole separate process like we talked about, that you would want to go through the same steps of the framework here, as well as this worksheet to define. And then if the move-in inspection is complete, which it is, then in the sidebar, then we're going to click that. And now we need to schedule our move-in date. Okay, so that's that custom field we added. So I'm going to do that now. Click edit over here. There's two places to edit in the sidebar, one right up here at the top, which is super convenient, and then down below here in details as well. So either one works. Hit move in. All right, we're going to say they're moving in on Saturday, the 13th at 12 p.m. Sweet. So they're moving in Saturday. We can see now that prints out in the instructions. We're done. Awesome. Then we're going to notify the tenant that we've got the move-in date scheduled. Obviously, you can notify the owner as well. We could have a step for that if we wanted. So emailing him. And now we're going to confirm that we have everything from the tenant before giving them the keys. We have a full list here. If I actually wanted to edit this along the way as an admin, I can do this. Can update the instructions. So that's one thing you can update. Obviously, I have this tab open as well, so I can make edits along the way too. As I see little issues or running through these tests, you usually run into a few things. And what's super cool here is now we have the meeting scheduled for Amy because she's the leasing agent at that time, based on the move-in date. Okay, so she's going to get, and she's also going to get a reminder sent to her 30 minutes before, because that's how we, or 60 minutes before, because that's how we set this up. So super cool to have those relative due dates and schedule tasks based on them. So now she's going to be reminded to do that. I'm just going to check it off for her as if it happened. And then the process will progress into the move-in. The final tenant moved in, and then we will notify the owner that the tenant was moved in here. Great. So we're going to notify the owner. And then we will also, if the owner has referred, pay a referral fee. And that was, again, assigned to Chris in accounting to do that. So after we check that off, boom, we're done. And we've run through a full test. We have all of the activity log here of exactly what happened. And I can show you the cancel stage as well. Make a note why this was canceled, and then save, and then return the security deposit if necessary. And then we have instructions on that as well. So that was whirlwind, I know, for most of you. And I actually didn't get to questions during it, but I want to just keep rolling through all the way through doing full tests from start to finish. And again, you can improve on it over time, run multiple tests. That's usually how I do it. Usually I add a test property, a test owner, test contact, so I can test how emails are being sent, look at the templates, all of that. As you saw, is some good setup to do, to have a nice test property with test tenants and owners as well. So that's what I would definitely encourage you guys to do as you start implementing these processes. But again, I can't emphasize enough that working through the framework first, running through all these steps, doing the worksheet, especially if you have not really thought about this process and defined it well, it's invaluable. And you can see how easy it was for me to take this, which is really the bulk of the work, is coming up with all of this, and then move it into LeadSimple was far easier than just trying to start with LeadSimple at the beginning and then try to figure out how does LeadSimple work and how should I be doing my process while you're actually trying to put it in LeadSimple. Okay, so I don't see any questions in the Ask a Question area. I know we just hit time, so I think we're just going to wrap it up. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us in chat, which will be in the bottom right-hand corner of your LeadSimple account. You can't see it here because I'm logged in as an admin, so I don't see it. But feel free anytime to reach us out there with questions or any follow-up or any other webinar topics you'd like to see and hear about. I thank you all for jumping on. I hope that was really helpful. It was, again, kind of a whirlwind, but I wanted to basically take it all the way from scratch to completion. And in this part 2, I hope that was helpful. And let us know if you have any more feedback here in the chat or, again, in the intercom chat down here in the right hand of your account. Thanks so much, guys. We'll have the recording sent to you all with in the follow-up email, as well as that slide deck that we looked at and the worksheet blank template for you. So you'll be able to use all those tools as you work with processes in LeadSimple. All right. Thanks again. See you guys soon.